Okay, we're going to get started. And today is a special day for those of us who are in the Christian faith because this marks Ash Wednesday. But I thought today there's so much going on in our world that we just take a minute to sit back, to breathe, to take a deep breath, and just say a silent prayer for the people of Ukraine. So if you don't mind, let's just do that for a few, just do that, a silent prayer for them. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see you. It's good to see old faces. Excuse me, my phone. Good to see people in retirement joining us. It's nice to be able to come because you want to be here. That's really good. We have a very important guest today. We don't want to take up too much of her time, but we do want to invite her to share with us. And Kathy, did you want to introduce her, or do you want me to go ahead and do it?
No, you can go.
Sorry. Kelsey, why don't you do it?
There you go. Perfect. Even better.
Yes. Kelsey, this is your event. So please introduce her. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sorry, I'm using my phone, so I don't usually use that. So I'm getting re-familiar with the controls. Well, I'm probably going to all mess it up because I didn't realize I was going to be introducing Arina, but Arina Van Breda is the chair of voter registration at the League of Women Voters for Fairfax. So, and I'll let her tell you more about the organization. We've had a good chat. She and Kathy and I, both a pre-brief and Brenda on Monday, and then discussions all last week over what to give you guys today in this very important topic. And if you realize, I think the president covered everything last night, but he did mention voting again, so one of the things is obviously the Voting Act, but what can we do then to get people registered, to advocate for voting, for getting those who are the least, the lost, and the left out often in our community into vote, where in a way that they don't feel threatened, that they feel that their vote is their power. So I'll turn it over to Arina now.
Okay. Thank you very much. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I want to thank Kathy and Kelsey and Brenda and the entire VIC community for welcoming me and giving me an opportunity to speak to you. As Kelsey said, I'm currently the chair of voter registration for the League of Women Voters. I too am a retiree, as I heard Brenda shout out to everybody before. And for just a second, I will show you why I have chosen this particular area of activity for my retirement years. And that is because unlike a lot of people who never get to meet their life heroes, I got to meet my life hero, John Lewis. And he's been an inspiration for me for a very long time. But I have taught the younger people in my life that, if you're really stuck in terms of what are you going to do, it's never a bad thing to think, well, what would John Lewis do? I figured what John Lewis would want us to do is to help get people register vote, to use their superpower, which is voting, and to strengthen our democratic process. So I'm going to just share with you, with luck. And yes, you can see my slides, presumably. Okay. So the League of Women Voters in the Fairfax area is the local chapter of a nationwide organization. I'm sure we are all of a generation that has heard of the League of Women Voters. I've actually only become active since I've retired. But this is an organization that's been around for 102 years. It was started right after the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920. And the League in Fairfax comprises about almost 400 people who all, to one degree or another, share the same passion, which is to, our motto is to empower voters and to strengthen democracy. We have a number of ways of accomplishing that particular mission. The two areas I'll be talking about in terms of our hope to have a partnership and an involvement with VIC are the first two listed here, which is to provide nonpartisan, and I cannot emphasize strongly enough, everything we do is strictly nonpartisan and highly accurate, trustworthy voter information. Because as you're all aware, there's a tremendous amount of disinformation out and around. And so we feel that as part of our mission to help counter that by providing reliable information. We also believe passionately in doing voter registration so that people are able to exercise their civic right to be able to vote. And we do advocacy. And this is probably something that a lot of people don't realize that the League does. So I did want to spend a couple of minutes talking about it. I said we are part of this nationwide organization. The League of the United States is based here in Washington, D.C. And they have actually, I think for many people would be surprised to know just how active an advocacy program the League has. Their priorities are expanding voter access, trying to stop and stem the tide on some of the steps that we have seen recently where states are actually trying to curb or inhibit voter registration, inhibit voter participation. The League fights tooth and nail to make sure that the franchise is offered to as many people as are legally entitled to, and to lower barriers to voting and voting participation, not to raise them. We have advocated for nonpartisan redistricting and getting rid of gerrymandering. I already mentioned we do fight voter suppression and have filed a number of lawsuits, including here in Virginia, to try to make sure that laws aren't being passed or enacted or applied that would inhibit people's ability to vote. Another major priority for the League US is to fight money in politics, dirty money in politics. But we also advocate on a bunch of issues that are not necessarily voting related, at least not on first view. Things like healthcare, affordable healthcare for all is a huge priority. Ensuring that we fight for a clean and just environment, that the costs of climate change are not unfairly borne by a minority and low-income communities as they have, for immigration rights and for fair census process. We also advocate at a statewide issue. So there's the League US does national stuff. We have a statewide organization, the League of Virginia. And actually, as you all know, right now, there's a very active and contentious legislative session going on in Richmond. I've been down to Richmond myself to help lobby for some of our priorities. Our priorities for the League this year include restoration of returning citizens' voting rights. I'm not sure if everyone heard, but yesterday there was a very disappointing vote in a House subcommittee where the constitutional amendment that already passed once and needed to pass again unchanged was defeated by a small subcommittee in the House that would have allowed Virginians to vote as a constitutional amendment on allowing citizens who have been restored to civic participation, have served their sentences, and should be given the right to vote again automatically without having to jump through a whole bunch of hoops. That got defeated. And so I'm not sure that that has any pathway to see us enact it, but it is a strong priority for the League. We feel that people who have completed their sentences should be warmly embraced back in the civic community and be able to participate in voting. We have also fought to get rid of the witness signature requirement for absentee voting. Absentee voting has become a much larger part of our normal voting process. And to ask people, particularly in the face of a pandemic, to find a witness to scribble something that's not verifiable, that's not checked, that has really nothing to do, it's kind of like voodoo. We want to get rid of that because many states don't have a witness requirement. There's no reason why Virginia should put that additional impediment in the way of people being able to vote safely from home. We are fighting to oppose vouchers and tuition tax credits, anything that would divert public funding from schools into private education where those people paying the funds in the way of taxes don't have any way of monitoring or having input into how those funds are spent. We're always lobbying for campaigns finance reform, where Virginia remains one of the worst in the country, and that's not likely to change in this session. We fought up for a bunch of bills to maintain or increase voter access, to do away with some of the proposed restrictions on the ability to vote. I don't know if people were following what was going on in Richmond, but there were a number of bills that would have made it much harder for people to vote, including getting rid of the permanent witness, permanent absentee list. That would have gone back to requiring a reason to vote absentee. And I worked my entire life on a schedule where I could never be sure whether or not I was going to be able to make it to the polls on election day. And even knowing that and having that experience, I was always a little bit intimidated when you had to check a box that said, are you going to be unable to reach the polls between 6 a.m. and 7 p.m.? And I thought, well, there's a possibility I might. Can I really check that? Is that legitimate? It does impede people's willingness to participate in the process. Early in-person and by mail voting was widely accepted and highly successful in Virginia, which ran a really good election in terms of security and safety. And there's no reason to roll back any of those protections. Women's reproductive health is always an importance for us. And a particular area of concern is the disparate rates of infant and maternal mortality in the minority community, something that we advocate for regularly. So that's our lobbying thing, was done by the League US and the statewide league. We do some lobbying within Fairfax County for county specific issues, but I really want to turn our attention for the rest of this discussion to the other major area of activity and interest for us, and my particular area of interest, and where I'd like to see if we can work with the VIC community and the VIC organizations to do this, which is in voter registration and education. As I mentioned, that really is my area of passion. And we do this as a league in Fairfax in a number of different ways and venues. One of the biggest programs we run is an active voter registration program within the high schools. We are the only organization besides the registrar's office that is allowed to go into high schools and provide voter registration. And we register hundreds of newly eligible voters that way, because a lot of these kids senior year, they're going to be able to vote for the first time. And so we get them registered and we try to provide them with some basic information about what's involved with voting, because boy, you want to talk about a group that really doesn't know. A lot of kids assume that, of course, you can vote online because they do everything online. So we try to kind of give them the basics. Civics in my day was taught in high school, but that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. And I think we as a country are all paying the price for that now. We do voter registration events and voter education events throughout the county, throughout the year. Our big single day event is in September, National Voter Registration Day. This past year, we had nearly 70 volunteers from the league at every single one of the Fairfax County Public Library branches doing voter registration and voter education. We show up regularly. You've seen us at farmers markets and festivals and fairs, some of which have taken place here in the Mount Vernon Route 1 community. However, we recognize that we need to do a better job of meeting the communities needs where they may not have the same access to information. They may not have the same ability to prioritize this because they're dealing with much more basic levels of needs. They need food, they need shelter, they need security, they need basic education. Your organizations are providing those. But in addition, we feel strongly that we need to make sure that their need to have voter education, voter registration available. And so we are making that a priority going forward. We want to try to reach the communities that haven't usually been, have these resources available to them. So we know from statewide and Fairfax County and just national experience that there are lower rates of voter registration and turnout in areas where there's a higher percentage minority population, where there are younger voters, because younger voters do not participate nearly as much as older voters, lower income communities, and low educational attainment. Fairfax County and the state of Virginia has identified the Route 1 corridor as an area where there are a large number of potential voters, people who are eligible to register or eligible to vote, who either don't participate or are not yet registered. I should also add to the list of communities that are in need of information and resources are areas where there's high turnover, because a lot of people, when they're moving frequently, don't realize that every time you move, you have to update your voter registration form. So particularly given that in Virginia, we have an important election every single year, they've moved, you know, they think voting is a once every 4-year event, and then they want to go and vote. And then they find out that their voter registration is outdated. So high areas of highly transient communities really do need this kind of information reminded to them regularly. We believe as the League, that it's important that every community be represented. If people aren't voting, then the legislature does not represent the population. It only represents the people that vote. And then the needs of the community aren't being addressed. So we, you know, the community, all of the community has to be able to vote and has to vote. And that's hopefully our goal, is to try to make that happen so that everybody's voice is being heard. So why are we coming to this group? Well, we know, and a lot of this information that I'm about to present to you comes from nonprofitvote.org. It's a really great resource, and I strongly urge you all to consider looking at it. It's just all one word, nonprofitvote.org. And they are, like we, a nonpartisan organization, but dedicated to trying to wed the resources for voter education to the communities that need it through the role of nonprofits. You have the relationship with the community. Your clients, our residents, come to you because you provide food, shelter, healthcare, education, all the basic needs that every human being has. The League is an organization that has the materials, the resource, and the content expertise to be able to provide voting education, voter information. And if we can work together, if we can provide these resources to you when you need it, in the format that you need it, then we can help fulfill the needs of the community. And so the way we do that, we have done that, and we'd like to do that, is to provide materials to educate the community about why voting is important. And I have to say, that's one of the biggest messages, because an awful lot of people feel disempowered. They feel like their vote doesn't matter, that it's not something that really affects them, that why bother to vote? And that's probably the single most heartbreaking thing I hear, because, you know, it's just clearly, without voting, nothing ever changes in a legal democratic process. So we're trying to counter that. And then we also provide more logistical information, how to register to vote, ways to vote, when to vote, where to vote, all those nuts and bolts things that are obvious to those of us who've been voting our entire life. But if you're a first-time voter, you're a new citizen or returning citizen, you're a student, and this is your first time. All those things seem really intimidating, and we can help lower that informational barrier by providing those materials. The thing I really like to do, and now that we're finally coming out of the pandemic, I hope we're able to do more, is offer in-person voter registration events. Probably the single most prevalent way for people to register to vote, and certainly to update their voting information, is online. And we do give resources to allow people to be able to do it online. I really feel that our success rate in getting people through the process, to not be intimidated, to look at a website and say, oh, wait a minute, I don't know if I trust this, is for us to be standing there and saying, yes, okay, here, let me show you how to do that. Some of the materials that we have developed, and I do want to emphasize, these are materials that we've developed, you know, not just for us to go and hand out. We want to hear from the community what would be most helpful to you, so we can develop those particular resources and then get them into the hands of your organizations to hand out to your clients as they need them. And it's from very basic information, motivating people to vote, to much more detailed information about the specifics. We have been concentrating, the flyer up at the top right-hand corner is about the safety and security of elections, trying to counter that idea that a lot of people have been deliberately misled by, that voting is rigged, voting is insecure, elections are stolen. We want to counter that with some real factual information. So the motivating message, which is, you know, your vote matters, I think is the one that's crucial to get out to those people who just don't believe that the system works for them or could work for them. And, you know, it is difficult, you know, some of my nieces and nephews is like, well, I voted once and nothing changed, so why should I vote again? You know, this was a waste of time. It's like, well, you know, look how long it has taken for us to make sure that everybody has, at least theoretically, the right to vote. That when this country was founded, so large a part of our community were excluded, African Americans and women and others. You had to own property to vote. It's taken a long time to get here. One election isn't going to change. And so that message, I found, is something you have to just reiterate over and over again, because we can't have people throw up their hands after one election and say, well, you know, that was a waste of time. So that we try to provide that kind of information. And let me just show you one of the flyers that we, oh dear. I hate that when that happens. Let's see, stop share, and then I'm going to try that again. Okay, we should be back. My computer seems to have a mind of its own sometimes. So here's one of the motivators. We passed this out with a lot of our food bank work. We participated in a program with National Capital Area Food Bank last year, where we were providing flyers to food banks throughout Fairfax County. And we did this in a stepwise fashion. The first was a simple empowerment message. There is a reason to vote. You get, you know, schools, housing, all of these things. It changes, it improves when you vote. And we've tried to provide this in the appropriate languages. Most of our things are at least bilingual, because such a large part of our community is Hispanic. But we also have the ability to provide other language support as a community needs it. So from a simple empowerment message, our follow-up message was, well, why is this particular election important? Because again, most people are leading busy lives, and particularly if they're under economic and other stresses, this is not the first thing they're thinking about every morning. So we feel it's our duty to make sure people are aware of that. Well, last year we voted for governor, lieutenant governor, and our state's delegates. This year we'll be voting for our House of Representatives at the federal level. So all of these are basic informational pieces that we just have to be reiterated. And we try to do this, as I said, in a fashion that's acceptable and understandable to the community. We also have, this one is in Spanish, but we have them in every other language group that's significant in Fairfax County. So Korean, Vietnamese, Chinese, Arabic, and I'm missing something, at least some others. And it's a simple card that you can just hand out that's got links to all the important things that people would need. Just who's going to be running this year? What offices are up? How do I find out where to vote? How do I register to vote? So we hand these out a lot. And again, the one language group we don't have this in yet that we're going to work on is Amharic, because I know there are large areas in the county where that's important, but that's a work in progress. But we have other languages with this kind of material available. This was another flyer that we handed out as part of our project with the food bank. And as you can see, there's multiple languages here. This one did have the Amharic and Arabic. We use large posters at our events. We try to show up in the community with large poster boards, particularly during COVID, where they didn't have to necessarily interact or take a piece of paper. So we use QR codes so people get a direct link to be able to register to vote. Again, I feel that that's wonderful, but if you put the sign out and you don't have somebody standing there saying, honestly, you can do this, it'll only take you a couple of minutes and you'll be registered, it doesn't get done. So we think it's got to be the human urging plus the digital media to get there. Here's one of our signboards, and this was one of the events that we got to participate in last year, which was the Juneteenth celebration at Gum Springs. And I'm sure many of you know Queenie Cox, and that she's standing there with Don Craig. He is our voter services chair for the League of Women Voters. We are not just all women, and he's done a lot of good work in helping us connect with the community. But you can see our signboard there with the QR code to try to make it as easy as possible for people to get this information available. So I think it's pretty obvious there are a lot of reasons why nonprofits and organizations such as yours can be the conduit to allow us to get this information into the community. For your own organization, if you are known for doing this kind of work, you will get more attention from people who are elected at all levels of government, because they know you're actively recruiting voters. And again, we are strictly nonpartisan, and you as nonprofits are also need to adhere to being strictly nonpartisan. But being involved in the process is a powerful way to amplify your message, both with the people you serve and the people who are theoretically serving them in the government. And I think another important aspect of this that's well worth remembering is that when you encourage people to vote and you have them get registered and you have them vote, and they realize that this is something that is within their power, it does empower them. And it helps build that sense of community. And it actually, when you have people who understand this, and I know a lot of people in our community do, in your community, which is also mine, I'm also in the Mount Vernon area, already see that. But as they take a leadership role in promoting voting rights, that obviously helps with building community-based leadership. This was an event we did at Rising Hope Methodist Church with one of their food banks. And we were, again, working with the National Capital Area Food Bank on this. This was a young woman who's studying to become a citizen. And we were explaining to her that once she passes her citizenship test, then she will be able to get registered to vote. And, you know, just the smile on her face, in her eyes, under her mask, that she would be able to vote was extremely rewarding. An awful lot of the times when we're at food banks and things like that, there's a large part of the community that won't be eligible to vote because they're not citizens, but their children come, we engage with the children, we give them coloring sheets and crayons, and all of our materials we're handing out have vote on them somewhere. So that's going back into the home, and we're hopefully promoting that sense that this is something that everybody is going to be able to do once they become a citizen, and that it's important to do. and again, this was at Rising Hope, and Dr. Turner is actually the president of the League US, and she was in DC for an event at the Capitol for voting rights. And she came to participate in one of our food bank drives. That's Melissa Lee, who was the manager at the food bank there, and gave us a warm welcome. Another event in the community that we participated in, the kind of things we want to do. This was a back to school fair at Creekside last year, where the people were providing vaccination shots and back to school information and book supplies and all kinds of great things. And we were very happy that we could be there because we were bringing our message about being empowered through voting. We were able to register 14 new voters there, which we were extremely pleased by. And these are the kinds of things that we feel is important, that it has to be a regular presence, that just like you can expect to get your healthcare and food and security, educational needs, that your voting needs need to be met as well. Nonprofits are key to accomplishing this because you have the trust of the community, you have the audience, and it's an audience that's in the greatest need of this. We know from statewide statistics that in general, Fairfax County has a 2% higher voter engagement rate than statewide, which makes us, we're a big turnout area, because 2% makes a big difference in terms of turnout. However, in specific communities, the minority community, young people, low income populations, those numbers are significantly lower, not just than Fairfax averages, but the statewide averages. So it really disadvantages that population in terms of getting heard by politicians. If you don't vote, they're not going to listen nearly as much. That's not right. They should be listening to all of our residents, but that's the system, the way it works currently. So we have to work within this. Nonprofit Vote, the organization I mentioned earlier, has good data that shows that when nonprofits interact with and have interactions with younger voters, they will increase that group's turnout by 5%. Hispanic voters, 5%, low-income voters, 7%. When you start coupling some of those factors together, so in this instance, low-income Hispanic voters, there's a 10% turnout increase from before the nonprofit started talking to them about voting till after, that went from 45 to 55%. And that actually got that particular group on par with white turnout. And as we know, there's a huge racial disparity in terms of voter engagement because of historic factors that have a nasty sordid history in this country and in the state in particular. But we're hoping by this type of partnership, we can undo some of those historical inequities. Low propensity but Black voters who just felt like, voting was not a priority or had other reasons for being disenfranchised or unwelcome in the voting process. When nonprofits engage with them about the importance of voting, there's 11% increase in turnout. And I think those are worthwhile numbers to try to achieve. So, bottom line, nonprofits, your community members, your organizations can and should provide voter information and register, which will strengthen the community, empower your residents. And we would love to be, we as the League of Women Voters in Fairfax would love to be a partner in that because of the materials and the just physical support that we can provide to that. And that's my pitch in a nutshell, and I'm more than happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Arina, for the information that you shared with the group. That is super interesting, and I really think that is something that we can really partner to trying to help the clients that we are serving. I am from the Financial Empowerment Center, and again, 90% of our clients are in the low income bracket. So question, were you able to are you able to provide maybe a workshop online? Is that something that you are open to?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I will be contacting you email separately to see if we can maybe put something in our calendar. And then I have another 2 contacts that I want to share with you. Maybe because they are working with immigrants. So again, that could be a way.
Okay, I am putting in the chat right now.
Okay,
My
thank
email.
you. Awesome, thank you.
And I'm going to, at the risk of wearing out my welcome, share just one more thing, because I seem to have missed it or I glossed over it. And I do think this is important, because one of the things I found as we've been trying to get the word out that, hey, we're here, use us, we'll work with you, we'll get you the information, the materials you need, tell us what you need, let us do what we can. And then an awful lot of the time I get this immediate, like, wait, this is politics. We don't do politics. I think people are, and understandably, intimidated because they worry about their getting scrutinized or complaints from one or another part of the political spectrum. If they do anything that seems even remotely political. And I think that's giving into the bullies, and it's giving into fear, because if you are a 501c3 organization, there's explicit affirmative language that you may conduct voter registration, connect voters with candidates, as long as you're doing it on a nonpartisan basis. And I think it's unfortunate because you are in such a unique position to be able to get this information out and and I keep using the word empower, but I think that's really the right word, your clients, your community, by giving them this information. And if you feel that, you can't because it's political and it may somehow cross a line, that really legally isn't the case. I just want to make sure people were aware that this is something that you can do, and you definitely should consider doing, because of the larger impact that it has on just making our democracy work better for all of us. Are there any other questions?
Any other questions for her?
Yeah,
Laura,
I have one.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Mary Payton. I have one question. I used to do a lot of voter registration in the area and also help coordinate some of the groups so that they weren't trying to set up shop at the same shopping center at the same time on the same day. And I wonder if anybody's doing that now. I know there's a really good group that does kind of shopping center registrations, and Holland Hall, Diane, gosh, blanking on her name, but I know Virginia New Majority comes in here, and there's a number of groups that kind of come through and do things, and one that's homegrown. And I wonder if you all talk to each other so you can really maximize your efforts.
Well, I do know that that one in particular that you were talking about being at the shopping centers, that they basically had to stop doing it last year. And it wasn't clear. And again, this is one of the problems that we're running into, is that just getting access to the community, because so many people are, the minute you talk about anything that might be remotely political, they're like, I don't want anything to do with that. So the shopping centers had actually withdrawn the permission for them to be able to do that. And we don't see this as a competitive thing at all in terms of the other organizations that are doing voter registration. We want people to get registered to vote, but we also want them to have the information. And with a lot of the organizations that do this as their major effort, they're doing this like once a year, once every 4 years, or once every 2 years, because they're much more involved with national elections and not so much with the state. Whereas in Virginia, we're doing this all the time. And I also think that it's important for it not to be a one-time thing where you show up in, you know, September, and it's like, okay, now you got to get registered to vote, and here's how you vote. But it's a message that we should be providing kind of on a regular basis all the time, because, you know, as my marketing friends have told me, it's like you tell somebody once and it's gone. You got to be there and tell them over and over again. And, you know, this is an area where we're fortunate, because a lot of people, you know, are engaged in the community in one way or another. You guys are making sure that people have the ability to be engaged. But we want to make sure that that engagement gets translated into the action, and the action being the voting. So it's difficult because the coordination, because we never really know where people are going to be showing up. But we want to provide the information that's usable to the community, that's developed with that particular community involved in mind. And I mentioned it, and I'm going to just reemphasize, we want to hear what you think is the message that would be most useful for your particular community of need, and let us, you know, help bring that in a format that you think is useful, not simply say, here's what we got handed out, you know, and let's hope more people vote. But you're right, Mary, it is a little bit of a challenge, because there can often be more than one. We don't want to duplicate work necessarily. We'd really rather find, I used this analogy with someone the other day, and I apologize if Kathy and Brenda and Kelsey heard it before. I feel that an awful lot of the time, the work we're doing is the gleaning. You know, yes, large numbers of people are voting, but they're those small, you know, grains of wheat on the side of the road that are being ignored. And it's our duty to go out and make sure that they're also being brought into the process, that we're covering as many of the population as we can, because everybody's vote matters.
Kelsey, did you have anything to add?
I do, because this is, to me, and I'm really passionate about getting people to vote. It isn't just about registering them. We've got to get them to vote. We've got to get access. We've got to get them passionate about voting. There's a whole lot of things wrapped up in that. One of the things that we talked about at the pre-brief on Monday was, where are the voting sites? Are the voting sites set up to really help our people in the community, or are they set up because it's expedient? You know, and with the redistricting, the polling places, I took a look at online. The only map they have right now is a 2021 map. They don't even have the 2022 map up yet of where the polling places are going to be. And I think this is something that VIC could definitely, and Arina, and we had talked with Arina about if she could help facilitate talking to Fairfax County's Department of Elections to say, where are you guys going to be putting polling places, and why are you putting them there? I go back to 2020, and I vote in Washington Mill, which is in the middle of the expensive area of Mount Vernon District, without good public transportation. I met the sweetest little Hispanic lady who, she was so excited to vote for the first time in a primary, no less. And she'd had to take time off of work, and then she had to find a way there. Well, there's not good bus transportation to Washington Mill. The closest you can get is, you know, the Mount Vernon Highway, and then you got to walk a mile or so. And it's like, this isn't getting people access. You know, it might be okay if you got a car and can drive, but where are the others? We talked about that too, in terms of why isn't the Gum Springs Community Center a voting place instead of at the precinct, you know, at the near the police station, you know, and it's just, where are these places and how are we getting people to access them? How it helped that we had a lot of online voting and absentee ballots the last year. But that was also confusing for people. The directions weren't always easy, and how many votes got thrown out, how many people didn't know about it. And so I think there's a whole lot still wrapped up. I think it's really great that we can, you know, lean on the League of Women Voters or any other voting group that's out there to help get people registered. But I think we still have more that we need to do to say, not only do we have to register them, but we got to get them to vote so that, you know, they really do have a voice in what's going on in the community. And I think at this point, any ideas should be on the table.
Yeah, I can tell you that all the new precinct guidelines, maps with the voting locations they've been proposed. There's going to be a public opportunity for public comment, I think on March 8th. Is that right, Maria? I think that's the 8th. And then they'll be approved, and then the county will be disseminating this information. And pretty much every voter is going to be getting new information because all of the House of Delegates districts are going to have been changed because of redistricting. So everybody is going to get their new information. In terms of, I know that for early voting sites, there are a number of complaints about early in-person voting sites. I mean, I'm really pleased that Virginia has now allowed no excuse early voting for as many as 45 days prior to the election, and including on at least one Sunday. I think Fairfax County will continue to have that. But, you know, there are still lots of ways this could be improved, which is to make it more accessible, make sure that public transportation is being factored in. And that is a conversation that could definitely take place, you know, with the representatives from the electoral board. And this, you know, your organizations, this particular group may be a good one to weigh in on that. And I can certainly help with, you know, telling you how to get access to that so you can raise those questions, hopefully get some answers. Maria knows a lot about it too, so maybe she wants to speak up.
Just on this one, hi, I'm Maria Borrell. I'm with really Fairfax County Democratic Committee, but I also teach citizenship for Progresso. But I just wanted to mention that Karen Corbett Sanders is actually a good person to pull into this. We had 2 years ago a polling place it was the only early voting place in the south part of the district, and it was at a golf course. And you talk about isolating and the image of a golf course, it was nuts, right? But they were thinking about it at the Board of Elections. They were thinking about it because they have these requirements like ADA accessible, public owned, like libraries or schools. You know, they have a set of things, and demographics doesn't really fall into it that I can tell. So Karen, though, and I think it happened too late because it didn't get started till after things were going, and it wasn't a 45-day site, it was a 10-day site. I mean, we had long lines there, but it was a white population that is they knew about the golf course, a public golf course, right? So she, anyway, was able to get the school buses to do a loop to get people to that site. But, you know, something like that takes time. And if we had known about that as an option a month before, we could have done advertising to say that this is the bus route and here's where you can get a ride. Nevertheless, she was able to arrange that. And so I think if you have concerns about specific places, and by the way, the polling locations have all been selected for all 250 polling places in Fairfax County. And in the March 8th public hearing, they can hear comments, right? And so I'd be happy to send anybody, or Arina can send you where the list is of all of the polling places. And you could take a look at it. And if you have concerns about any of them, speak either at the March 8th hearing or talk to Karen before the election about the possibility of getting some assistance from the Fairfax County Public School bus system.
I think it's also important to note we may not be able to do anything this year, but it may be worthwhile as we get better educated ourselves, you know, what can we do for the next elections for the following years?
Well,
so don't think of it as short term.
Yeah. So, but if you take a look at the polling places that are going to be out there, and it's, you know, Arina can get you the list. I could get you the list. If you have concerns with any of them, if you tell me about it, I could do something this year, right? No, seriously, we can help make a stink about it, because, you know, the Democrats are dedicated to also having all people have equal access to the polls. So it's also something else to consider.
Okay, Karen had her hand up. Karen, did your question get answered? Karen? Yes, she on mute. All right, and she's taking her hand. Any other questions? comments?
Yeah, I've got a question. I had to step out for a minute because I had to take an important phone call, so I don't know if you covered this. But other than the vote, the committee vote that didn't restore the rights to returning citizens, are there other places in Virginia that we are concerned about in terms of voter suppression?
It's not so much places, it's just the rules, the laws that were proposed. Now, fortunately, the most egregious of those were stopped. But it's a very tenuous situation because depending what happens in the next statewide elections 2 years from now, that could all change. And then we could see things like what's happening in Florida or Texas, where people are being forced to wait on unendurably long lines, polling sites closed, polling locations made even less accessible. I'm sure you've all heard about the law in Florida that is trying to prevent organizations from supplying food and water to people that are being forced to wait online for 8 hours or longer, to prevent them from this simple act of human decency. Nobody was proposing anything that bad in Virginia so far, but there were other things. Okay, we mentioned that voting by mail has become hugely popular, and it should be. There are several states that do nothing but elections by mail. It is safe. There are safeguards built into it. It is secure. There is no fraud. There was no fraud in the Virginia election. And that's a message that we keep trying to get out. But one of the laws that was proposed would have required that, not just that silly, I mentioned how worthless the witness signature is, a meaningless thing. It's not checked against anything. It's theater, like get a witness. Like nobody checks it. It's just a scribble. Oh, okay, well, that's a witness signature. There were people whose votes were refused, were rejected because they didn't have a witness signature. But instead of that meaningless but fairly minor requirement, one proposal was that you would have had to have your absentee ballot notarized. You'd have to find a notary. There may be a fee involved. You'd have to go through all these hoops just to be able to vote by mail. This is clearly an intent to suppress people being able to vote. So right now, none of I think the only change that is likely to occur, and it's a minor one, is that in order to ask for an absentee vote ballot right now online, you have to supply the last 4 digits of your social security number. One jurisdiction, Fairfax actually, in the state, when people were asking for an absentee ballot by a paper form, mailing in a paper form, they were willing in some cases to waive that because they had other safeguards built in that they felt, and that was challenged in court. The challenge lost. Fairfax was allowed to do that. That is now probably going to, by law, mandate that every registrar have to request the last 4 digits of social security number before they issue an absentee ballot. And then Fairfax will practice what the rest of the state already does. But that's the only law right now that's likely to change significantly the process of voting. But again, we have another statewide legislative election not this year, but next year. And depending on, what the legislature, who's there, a lot more of those voter suppression, what I consider to be voter suppression bills, might actually pass. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? If not, thank you so much for Arina for showing up. And a great presentation, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from some of our organizations for more assistance. I did have one question I wanted to ask. Excuse me. Do you go to apartment complexes?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
You know, it's everything is, you know, these last 2 years, you know, I think we all have to reset our expectations, and we, like everybody else, have been, you know, we're a grassroots organization, we're volunteer driven, and you know, everybody we have is doing this on a volunteer basis. So a lot of people were quite reluctant to do face-to-face interactions. We tried to figure out ways to do that even during COVID, but now that we're hopefully, and my background before I retired was in healthcare, so trust me, I'm watching this quite closely. Hopefully we're coming to a different phase of the pandemic, but one where we'll be able to do person-to-person interactions much more, with a much greater assurance of safety. And that's really what we're hoping to do. So, you know, if you're throwing a community event or a festival or a fair, and, you know, you're thinking about, okay, we need the ice cream trucks and we need, you know, the health department and the fire department, blah, blah, blah. Just think, you know, we need somebody there to talk about voting. And you know, one of the benefits of the league is we're here, we're local, and we're nonpartisan. So you can safely have us do this within the guidelines of your own organization's limitations because of the having to remain nonpartisan.
Okay.
So thank you all for allowing me to speak. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Kathy, you want to close us out?
Sure. I just want to reiterate that she's there and her organization can help you. And I think Kelsey is willing to kind of be our kind of conduit to this whole process. She's very interested in this whole situation. So if you forget and you're like,
I actually joined the league, so I'm going to be involved in a number of ways, but whatever I can do, I'm glad to help. I know I'm going to get Rising Hope involved in some ways.
good. And that's what I wanted to say. If you forget and go, who was that speaker we had? We all know Kelsey, right? So hunt her down and have her help you. So I'm glad you all were able to come. I know this is a holy day, but this is very important stuff here. So I look forward to seeing you guys next month. And I have one question for you guys. I'm working with Supervisor Stork's office, and I know we want to talk to him about the homeless shelter. And Embark is our May meeting. Is there anything else you want to talk about issue-wide that's not Embark other than the homeless shelter at our May meeting? So I can convey that to him so he's ready. And if not, I'm sure I can come up with some things. And the steering committee will work on it as well. But just think about it. And if you can think of anything, send your questions to Brenda or myself. And we'll make sure that that gets to him so we don't put him on the spot too much when he comes to our meeting. And that's
Brenda,
all
can I
have.
make an announcement?
Oh, yes, please do.
Sure.
Friday at 11 o'clock. Friday is the World Day of Prayer, and at 11 o'clock at Heritage Presbyterian Church, we'll be having a service of prayer for world peace, especially focusing on Ukraine right now. It's open to all faiths, and it's going to be a pretty open meeting. And we're hoping for the Spirit to kind of take over in some of the meeting, but we do invite all of you to be there at 11 o'clock at Heritage Presbyterian Church this Friday.
Thank you. All right, Kathy.
Hey, all right, everyone. Well, take care, and we'll see you next month if there's nothing else. I think I'm good. You guys good? My camera's broken today, so sorry.
Thank you.
But,
have a good day.
yes, thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.